Everybody, welcome to this episode of Coffee with Jon. So excited to talk to Marty Frenkel. Marty, it's great to connect with you. I'm excited to talk to you for a couple reasons. One, you are on the executive committee. You're at Maddin Hauser. You're a co-chair, your financial services and real property litigation group. But you've been there for about 30 years. And you don't talk to a lot of people today and moving forward that have been somewhere for 30 years. And so it gives you a lot of perspective, right? Of the person and the character and what you've built. And so I want to kind of start there, right? Because 30 years, if somebody's listening to this in 30 years, which the beautiful part about a podcast is it lasts forever, right, they'll sit back and they'll say, how did he stay somewhere for 30 years?
Right.
So, and Maddin Hauser is 100 years old. So, I mean, let's start there. How did you, what's the secret?
Well, it's funny that you asked that question because I've had this conversation with my children and stepchildren as well as other young lawyers, is I always stayed because I saw that there were opportunities in front of me, that there were opportunities that could be seized. If I ever thought that I really had reached a dead end, then I guess my thought process might have been different. But because there were always opportunities that the firm either afforded me or at least allowed me to pursue, I never ran into a dead end or a brick wall. And I think that there is some value, and I think in the current generation, I think about, is there value to moving? And I think to some degree there is. But the question really is, in that context, how many moves do you really have? Because if you move too often, you're always going to be somebody else's person. You're never going to be part of the fabric of the organization. And I got to become part of the fabric of Maddin Hauser and to be able to continue the firm on over the last 3 decades. And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. I love the way you articulate that, to be somewhere, to be the fabric within a company. But I want to rewind a little bit, because you're talking about early on, you saw opportunities in front of you. To see those opportunities, you have to have the right lens.
Yes.
You have to have the drive. You have to be working really, really hard for a firm to say, hey, we are going to put something in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to those who are in their 20s or 30s right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Out of school, 1 year out of law school, kind of in that short time frame. Define what working hard means.
Okay. Well, I think first of all, if I could go back and tell my 20, early 30-something self a few things, I would have said, you know what? Frustrations are real.
Yeah.
They arise no matter what we're doing. And working hard means working through those frustrations.
Yeah.
That, in terms of putting in the time, I think this generation is every bit as hardworking as we were when we were younger. But pushing yourself to work through obstacles, work through frustrations, to see that anything that is worthwhile, it's not given, it is earned. And so it's working through those obstacles to get to the next obstacle. But in the process, you're also garnering opportunities. And also you said something very interesting, which I agree with, is looking at the world with the right lens.
Yeah.
That if one becomes fixated and defines an opportunity that looks like a ballpoint pen,
yeah,
and you say that opportunities only look like this. Well, if you don't run into a ballpoint pen in this analogy, you're going to miss a whole world of other opportunities
Yeah.
that are in front of you. You just have to be open-minded and look at it with that kind of lens.
And I love what you said about the ability to work through frustrations. Let's just kind of chat about that for a minute, because our generation, like, you went out with your friends, you came back 12 hours later, right?
Mm-hmm.
My kids, the I can't speak for you, but a lot of the kids today have helicopter parents, and they haven't had to work through the same frustrations that we had to work through. And so I think that's really, really insightful. How do you suggest anybody who's listening to this right now? Because I think if I'm a listener right now, I'm thinking, oh, that resonates, that hits with me, whether for me or for people I know. How do you do that? What's a way that you guide people to do that?
Well, first of all, part of it is innate. It comes from within. You had talked about having a certain drive. And, when I was young, I just had the drive to say, I'm not going to let something get in my way.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let it permanently derail me. I'm going to find a way under, over, or through the obstacle.
Yeah.
That was part of it is mental. And part of it is do the analysis. Is this frustration or obstacle, is this temporary? Or is it something that's permanent? Is it, part of the system, part of the fabric of the place that you're working at? Or is it something that might change, if you have another skill set, if you are able to demonstrate your value, if it happens to be a human being that they happen to move on, maybe you come up with a suggestion to the organization that removes a frustration that not only you are encountering, but others are encountering, and you've thereby improved the organization and you get past the frustration. There are innumerable ways to get beyond the frustration, but it starts with, one, having the drive, and two, engaging the mind and being analytical about how to overcome it rather than emotional.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said. And it's as you're talking, what I'm thinking about is, so many companies today, so many, apps and businesses and this, the topic of discussion is, how do we make this frictionless? Simplify it. I read an article in the Atlantic in 2008 called "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" And it was talking about how technology in 2008, Marty, is rewiring our brains to instant versus delayed gratification. And so really just kind of surrendering to the fact that there may be a little bit more friction than you're used to when it's one-click shopping online. And it may be not as instant, but delayed. And if you can surrender into that and know that there's frustrations and have the right guides to guide you along, that seems like a pretty great formula, which I know you do.
I do. And I want to hit upon what you just talked about, delayed gratification.
Yeah.
That, if we want something on Amazon, instant gratification is totally the way to go. Okay.
They have drones now. Have you seen that? Have you seen? Yeah.
But careers aren't really, they're not really attuned to instant gratification. Careers, because they're constructed. And I actually read, this is several years ago, pretty sure it was a Harvard study where they studied a group of people from the early 1970s to a few years ago, and they tracked their careers, and they wanted to see what characteristic, was there one or multiple characteristics that really determined success over failure over the course of a career. And there are actually two characteristics that stood out. One was the ability to delay gratification. So having the ability to plan for the long run as opposed to the instant, that really propelled people's careers over the course of a lifetime. And the other one was innate, is they had grit.
Yeah.
People who have long-term success, they had grit, the ability to push past frustrations.
Marty, I don't know if this is the same experiment, but there is an experiment called the marshmallow experiment.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, so it's the same thing. They put these, like, I don't know, 7-year-old kids or something in a room, and if they cannot eat the marshmallow for 15 minutes, they're in a room. I think I'm getting this kind of right. They're in a room with a marshmallow for 15 minutes, and if they can either eat it, but if they wait the 15 minutes, they get a second marshmallow.
Right.
And same study, years later, the ones who delayed gratification and got the second marshmallow showed to be more successful in life.
Totally.
Right. So there you go, coffee community, 2 studies on delayed gratification. All right. So, but let's talk about instant gratification, somewhat instant gratification when it comes to client services, right? And how we work with clients. I really would love to talk about the philosophy of Martin Frenkel. The philosophy of how you practice law, the philosophy of how you see client relationships and building relationship capital, and the art of client service.
Well, it truly is an art, not a science. But I would start with the fact that when I was young, early in my career, I had kind of this epiphany that I looked around. I've been in the profession for 3 or 4 years, and I realized there were a lot of lawyers I had encountered, not at Maddin Hauser, but in the practice as a whole, that I didn't like so much. I didn't care for them. I didn't enjoy the interactions with them. And I thought about, lawyers are the butt of a lot of jokes.
Yeah.
And I also looked at my own personality, and my personality was not befitting of the shark. I didn't want to be the shark. I didn't want to be the butt of a bunch of lawyer jokes because it didn't fit me.
Yeah.
And so I understood that I needed to be myself in order to build relationships with clients, because ultimately that's what we lawyers sell trust. That is what we do. And most lawyers think that they sell the last 1% of expertise on the planet. And I would disagree. I would say, obviously one has to be competent in order to provide good counsel. But the real reality is nobody comes to a lawyer. Nobody calls me up. Maybe it's just my personality, but nobody calls me up and says, "Hey, how are you?" Okay. They come to me because
they think they're on the clock.
Right.
Not saying that they are, but they think they are. Right.
But they either have a problem that needs solving desperately, or they have an opportunity that needs seizing.
Yeah.
They need to seize. So they're coming to you with something that's very important to them, very urgent. And under those situations, you want to work with somebody who you can trust.
Yeah.
And excuse my language, has a lot of give a shit.
Yeah.
You have to have a lot of passion for your client. And often you have to, if you want to be successful, care more about them and their issue, perhaps even than they do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why they're probably calling you, right? I mean, I just go back a little bit, because they call you, and I know you jokingly say, like, they don't say how are you, but they're calling you typically, correct me if I'm wrong, with a high stress level. Yes. Right? They need to get all the information out, and so you can receive it and do what you need to do. what does again, diving into your philosophy, client service, and things of that nature, what does that first conversation sound like? How do you bring their, if you go on Instagram, say every word is cortisol, how do you bring their cortisol down? Right.
Well, part of it is you want them to know immediately that you're on their team.
Yeah.
There is no guesswork. I'm on your team. My team is on your team, and we're going to get this solved. And you want them to know that it might take us a little while to get it solved, but we're going to solve it. And I will tell them, let me take your stress. Let me take this on. This is my job. This is my area of expertise. I'm going to want you involved in it every step of the way, if you want to be involved in it, or if you merely want me to tell you when the problem is solved at the end, I will do that too.
Yeah.
But you want to let them know you're on their team. You're going to build a plan, and think about it how you would want, like when you go to a doctor, you don't want a doctor to tell you, you know what, John, I don't know. I've really never seen this kind of issue before. I really don't know what to do about it. You want them to be, give you confidence that they're going to take care of you.
Yeah.
And that's our job also. And so you want to convey that, bring their stress level down. Let's have a conversation about why you're here. And ultimately, as you continue on from that first conversation, do what you say you're going to do as the lawyer. And not once, not twice, not sometimes, always do what you say you're going to do. And attack the client's problem with urgency. Because if it was you sitting in that chair, right, you, the lawyer, and you put yourself in the client's shoes, wouldn't you want someone to attack your problem with urgency?
Yes.
Not, I'll get to it when I can.
Yeah. You're bringing up a lot of reasons why an attorney is an investment. And I think sometimes people look at it as an expense versus an investment or a cost of doing business and things of that nature. Talk to that for a second, because to me, and, I mean, I grew up that I knew you needed an attorney in life, right? Mm-hmm. I grew up knowing that you were to have an accountant. That's why, I basically failed accounting, and I thought, well, I'm going to have an accountant anyway. So, and attorneys, they have such insight. They know the law. I mean, things can, one word can change an entire sentence. And so, can you just talk about the importance of a human being? I know there's places people can go online and get something, but like a human being can, to just kind of recap some of what you're talking about, listen, ask questions, know where to dive into what's serious, take the stress off so you can get back to your daily living in life. I mean, can you just kind of like draw the picture of why people really need an attorney, and to see it with the right, I'm just going to go back to our favorite word of the day, lens. Yeah.
Well, there's on a lot of law firm websites, you'll see the phrase attorneys and counselors. Why? Well, because there is an element of counseling that we need to be, we have to remember that it's, a client is a person just like you are. Yeah. So don't forget to be empathetic. Don't forget to be a human being. And if you're that type of lawyer, that's very compelling. And AI it abounds, right? We can't have any conversation these days without talking about AI. And, AI doesn't have, it can maybe give me a technically correct answer, for example, but it's not going to be empathetic. It's not going to be compassionate. It may not be able to find whenever a client comes to you, there's usually an issue behind the issue. And so asking questions and getting to know your client, know their personality, and getting to what's really bothering them. They may have come in facially with one issue, but the real issue might be a lot deeper and might be what's really causing them a lot of pain and suffering that needs to be addressed. And, you know, a good lawyer will get to those issues.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second. You know, I think a lot of the issue behind the issue. You know, a lot of times I go to this Buddhist monk. He's actually an MD, and he's a Buddhist monk, and he was raised at 3.5 in a monastery in Beijing, taken by the traveling monks and raised in a monastery as a intuitive medical healer. Wow. And he does acupuncture and cupping. He's in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My whole family goes to him. Huh. And so about 10 years ago, when I went to him for the first time, I sat down and I said, Dr. Lou, let me tell you everything that's wrong with me. And he said, he like paused me and he said, let me talk to your body. He felt my pulse and put a couple needles in me, looked at my tongue, and he said, I'll tell you what's going on with you. And then you can tell me what you think is going on with you. My point is, his eyes and the way that he was trained could see any issue behind the issue. And I think you bring up a really important point. People are only as knowledgeable as what they are seeing with the lenses that they have experienced and the one or two sides that they can see something from. Mm-hmm. To me, an attorney in this case, like I'm going to compare you to Dr. Lou, can see things and can zoom out and see things in a very multidimensional way and see the real issue. And we talked, you mentioned earlier that it is an art. That's the art. Yeah. That's the art. So can you talk about a little bit how you get to the issue behind the issue?
Yeah, I think, first of all, you had mentioned this earlier on. It's asking questions. It's asking questions. Sometimes you may have a client, and I'll even ask them. I'll say, hey, please, just tolerate me for a minute because I'm going to ask you some questions that some of which you might think aren't really relevant. That maybe aren't really relevant to your story or aren't really what you think is important. But just give me a little bit of grace because I'm gonna ask you some things that might be important to me to know. And so by starting to build rapport with them so that no one feels comfortable sharing everything immediately. You have to build some rapport, but some of the things that they might not share with you immediately are critical in order for us to really solve the problem. Yeah. And so you have to be patient and you have to go ahead and be willing to ask a lot of questions and listen really, really carefully.
Yeah. Thank you for that. You mentioned AI. Let's talk for a minute about AI. Just for the listening community, business people, AI, I'm a big fan of it. I talk about it all the time. I love it. But AI is not perfect. It makes mistakes. I've talked to a good handful of people, especially in the law world, where AI has made up cases. And so, one of my favorite Coveyisms, inspect what you expect. And so, I think sometimes people think, and they do maybe serve a purpose to a point, AI is a therapist, AI is as a legal, mind to a point, in my opinion, right? Only a, degree from college, nothing, no medical or therapy degree. It's only to a point before you need a professional. And so can you just kind of talk about, at what point do we go from using AI as the end all be all to saying, okay, this is a great tool, but I am in a serious situation. I need, in this case, professional legal representation because?
That's a great question. I think, even before AI, you often have, you'll see clients over the years, some that are very, very sophisticated, and they'll come to you and they may know almost as much about the issue as you do at the outset, because they're very sophisticated. They've been doing what they do for a long time, but they don't know exactly how to take their understanding and deploy it, implement it, or they don't necessarily see all of the peripheral issues. Okay, that's even with someone who's sophisticated. So now let's take that to AI. Okay, AI can give you a recitation of the law on a particular topic, and it can do so pretty well if you ask it for a summary, but it can't tell you really how to apply it in a real world circumstance. And it will pretend to,
right,
but it won't necessarily do it with the savvy and the skill and the experience of an attorney that's been practicing for a long time, who can draw upon experience and say, I've seen this situation before.
Right.
Or maybe I've seen situations like it, but this fact over here is different. And it's really important. It's not going to tell you about the nuance of picking up the phone and how do you engage with the other side in order to get what you need out of the interaction. And so AI definitely has a place in the law. As you said, it will hallucinate. In fact, we've had the misfortune of having to get other lawyers sanctioned because they've used AI and it's created case law that didn't exist. But it does have a place.
Yeah.
But it's more foundational. It maybe helps us get to a particular foundation of base knowledge, but it's the experience of the lawyer after that that's important. And remember, John, when you're coming to us, the stakes are usually pretty high.
Right.
It's not like this is something that you can take a flyer on. Like, if all you had was $1,000 to your name, do you think it'd be a good idea to bet it on black at the casino? Probably not the best way to handle that, right?
Right.
And so when you're dealing with high risk situations where you're literally betting everything that you have on it, on the outcome, you want someone that really knows what they're doing, rather than leveraging the internet or AI.
Well said. So AI has elevated and changed and changed the game a little bit. But let's go back now 30 years, right? Mm-hmm. So we know AI is changing the game a little bit. You've been in this law firm for 30 years. What things haven't changed?
What things haven't changed? I think people remain the same. Technology may change, but human nature doesn't.
Yeah.
And so that's one great constant. Remembering that with all the technology that we have, it used to be faxes and email, and now it's AI and legal research and text and Google, all these things. You have to remember that at the end of the day, there's just another human being on the other end of that connection.
Yeah.
And so remembering how to treat other people and treat them the right way remains the same.
Yeah.
I think that client problems, again, because it's in part a product of the human condition. So the legal problems tend to remain the same. They might take slightly different forms because of technology. But again, it's either someone's coming to you back then or today because they've got a toothache and they want the pain to stop, or they've got a monster opportunity and boy, I don't want to fumble the ball. I need to capitalize on it.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed.
Yeah. Well said. You mentioned toothache and faxes. My dad was a dentist, and he was the first. All of his friends were dentists. Majority of his friends were dentists, and he was the first dentist to have a fax machine. And everyone said to him, "Mark," I remember, have them being with his friend, "Mark, what would you possibly need a fax machine?"
Right.
Yeah. He was. God, that was a long time ago.
Looking ahead, he understood.
He understood. He was very forward thinking. Talk to me. Take me back. Who's a mentor that planted some seeds early on for you?
I would say my deceased mentor, Bob Wortell, planted some seeds for me. He was a giant, a physical giant of a man, but also a giant in the legal world. And he was truly affable, civil, taught me that you didn't need to be a jerk in order to practice law at a high level.
Yeah.
That you could be a good human being. That was one. And also my deceased business mentor, Jules Rappaport, who taught me how to harness my drive in the right way and use it constructively to advance my career rather than, we were talking about frustrations, rather than getting wrapped up in those frustrations, and using the drive to push through the frustrations.
Yeah. You know this about me. Jules was my business coach too. And I loved Jules. I think about him all the time. So I'll add something in. He just infused a boldness in me that was just, I can't even explain it because I think I was already bold, but he just gave me the confidence to be like he kind of taught me, like, I've always thought of myself as a very kind person and bold and finding that balance.
Yeah.
And he just kind of helped me find the balance of it. He was just a spectacular, just person and coach, and I loved him.
I did too. Yeah, he helped both of us find our voice.
Yeah.
Knowing when to listen, knowing when to command the room, knowing when, all the emotions and nuances in between. He really taught you to think about that.
Yeah.
And find your voice.
Yeah. And he was no BS. He was great. Oh man. Oh, he was great.
I remember the first time I worked with him, he said to me, my daughter had just been born, and he says, "Hi, I'm Jules Rappaport. I understand you have a baby daughter. Congratulations." I said, "Well, thank you, Jules." And he said, "No, if it made a difference between her eating and not eating, and all you needed to do was pick up the phone and call a potential client or do something that was uncomfortable, would you do that?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, if you put it that way, I would do whatever I needed to do." Get a way of getting you through your own mental gymnastics to push you forward.
Yeah. Oh, he was great. Well, I'm grateful for him, and I know you are too. This is great. Marty, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to do a quick speed round with you.
Okay.
If you could have coffee with anyone, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Oh, Abraham Lincoln has always been a favorite historical figure of mine. I'm a big history buff, and just to talk to him and get inside of his head in the issues that he navigated, and frankly, no other president has ever navigated the issues that he did.
Yeah.
And the impact of the decisions that he made, to me, would be just fascinating.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I love studying history. I love studying history and love studying founders specifically. I think somebody I'd want to have coffee with as I'm sitting here today is Vanderbilt, because I'd want to ask him, how did you know to sell all the ships and get into railroads when there was no pace horse in front of you? Like, how did you, what instincts did you tap into to know that?
Yeah, that would be a fascinating conversation.
Yeah. A book that's made a big impact on you.
Ooh, well, I would say in the business arena, there was a book that actually Jules gave me called The Ultimate Sales Machine, by Chet Holmes. And that made a big impact on me because it taught me the value of persistence.
Yeah.
Being persistent in your mission to build your career.
Yeah. That's a really great book. A book that Jules gave me just to kind of carry some of the Jules tone today was a book called Influence, which was a really, really great book that he had me read. And one of the things I remember also, since we're talking about Jules, he's the first person that ever introduced me to Brene Brown. I had never heard of her. And he said, hey, I want you to watch this TED Talk, on, shame. And, I was like, I don't really feel that shame. He's like, just watch it. But yeah. So those are things. Best piece of wisdom you've ever received?
Oh my goodness. There's so many. You know what? When I was young and maybe I was down on myself, maybe I'd had a failure or something, my mom just had this little bit of simple wisdom that she didn't coin it, but she just would say, you know what, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Just remembering the temporariness of maybe bad things or difficulties in your life.
Yeah.
And that you'll get past it.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Finish this sentence. One thing every person needs to do, one thing every person needs to do to infuse a little bit more delayed gratification into their world is
planning. Like think about, like, it's an exercise. I mean, I'm sure you've done many times. Is think out 3 years.
Yeah.
Draw it up on a chalkboard. Visualize what would that look like. And when you do that, and you've used this term a few times with me on some other calls that we've had, reverse engineer from there.
Yeah.
And so by doing that, you are innately creating delayed gratification.
Yeah. Well said. Marty, tell everybody who your ideal clients are, where they can connect with you, in a little Marty commercial.
I thank you. I love middle market clients. I've been blessed also to have some very large clients and the mortgage space, construction, real estate, but also just middle market clients that maybe grew out of, maybe have real estate as a component, but I love getting my hands dirty in giving practical business advice.
Yeah.
People, there's an old quote, which I know I'm going to mess up, that JP Morgan said about lawyers. And so I know this is kind of a bastardized quote, but he said something along the lines of, I don't want lawyers to tell me what I can't do. I want lawyers to tell me how to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that. Yeah.
I carry that philosophy, and I just love engaging in that process with my clients.
That's great. And they can connect with you where?
They can connect with me. They go to maddinhauser.com. They can find me there. They can find me on LinkedIn. Now, not hard to find.
All right, good. We'll have all those links. Marty, this was great. I really enjoyed it. I want to extract a couple highlights for the business listeners. Work through frustration, delayed gratification, the examples that we gave, and the importance of finding the issue behind the issue, selling trust, the power of mentors, and I'll dedicate our talk to Jules Rappaport. And a lot of the fundamentals that I think he just infused in both of us. And I think I'll speak for both of us, but I think we carry them. And, and I think what Jules also shows is, and this kind of ties into you being at Maddin for 30 years. He passed away, unfortunately. I think it's like almost 9-10 years ago now. but his legacy remains daily. And
we're living proof of that.
Yeah. So I think it's great. Coffee community, you can reach Marty at maddinhauser.com and on LinkedIn. We'll have all this information for you in the show notes. Marty, this was great. Any closing thoughts?
I really enjoy the conversation. Both of us are very passionate about what we do, and it's always nice to have a conversation with somebody that shares that passion.
Yeah, I agree. It was great. Thank you so much, Marty. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marty.